So it's May now, and we're about to head into an amazing season of native color here in Utah. But right now my garden is still looking pretty flowerless, pretty bloomless, and I really want to start bulking up the early spring interest. I'm talking late March, all of April, a little bit of May, those blooms. You might think that you've missed the boat already on planting out seasonal interest, like early spring seasonal interest for your yard, but honestly, most of those plants aren't available for purchase that early anyway. So you have to plant things now if you want to have next spring totally popping off. So this video is all about what you can look for in nurseries this year so that next April is super colorful in your yard. While Utah does have several flowering perennials that come into flower in April, it's definitely May, June when things really start to pick up as far as seasonal interest and color is concerned. Therefore, if you really want early spring interest, I'm talking about March and early April, you're going to want to have evergreens forming a backdrop in your landscapes so that you have more color than just a handful of flowers can provide. One of my favorite evergreens to include in a Utah native landscape is coniferous. It's in the barberry family. It's a low-growing ground cover. It's foot traffic tolerant, but a little bit woody, so I wouldn't use it as a lawn alternative. However, it looks amazing along pathways or in the front of borders, and it'll just provide year-round interest even when other flowering perennials come in and out of dormancy. In that same vein, I also love creeping Oregon grape and grow low fragrant sumac. Creeping Oregon grape is a bulletproof plant. I have one in my side yard that I have never once watered, and she's doing just fine. It's not really walkable because while it is a ground cover, I use that term in that it's covering the ground, but she's still like a foot tall or so. So this is great for low maintenance areas, filling in sort of the middle section of showy flower borders or covering a side yard you don't want to do anything with, that kind of thing. What's amazing about Oregon grape is that it's evergreen or semi-evergreen, but it also flowers, and it has these electric yellow flowers that come into bloom in April. So you do get that extra spring interest on top of year-round interest. Grow low fragrant sumac I use sometimes interchangeably with Oregon grape depending on client preference. It has rounder leaves, whereas the Oregon grape might look a little bit prickly since it's related to holly. The sumac just has friendlier looking leaves, you might say, so some people like it more. However, it doesn't have spring interest. It does turn bright red in the fall, so you're getting that fall color. In the spring, it's still gonna look green and pretty and fill your yard with life and green color. For evergreens, if you want something a little more mounding, like something that would appear in a flower bed mixed in with other native grasses or flowering perennials, I like to use silver sage. It's a native sage, kind of like big sagebrush, but big sagebrush is a little bit scragglier. It's more sculptural. I feel like the interest with big sagebrush is the curving of the wood itself. So I would use that as a focal point in the landscape, whereas I'd use silver sage as a filler. I'd put several of them in a perennial border just to get some evergreen color, some texture. It's a really beautiful kind of soft feathery leaf in there. And they're a nice manageable size, just a couple feet tall by a couple feet wide. If you want a more mountainous look, if you like the look of coniferous evergreens like pines and spruces, there are dwarf globe blue spruces that'll do something similar, and also dwarf pinyon pines, pinyon pine being one of our amazing native pine species in Utah. And my favorite one has the cultivar name Farmy, and it's so cute. It can be like 1 foot tall or maybe sometimes 2 feet tall if it's really happy by 2 feet wide, in a really nice spherical growing habit. So I'll actually use that in place of boxwoods for anybody who wants a formal English design and they want those topiary style borders. I'll just do a full border of Farmy pinyons and you don't even have to prune them. But let's be real, if you're watching this video, you're not just looking for evergreens, you want spring interest, you want flowers because the winter has been cold and dark and long. And now you want actual color blooming in your garden, right? Well, we're a little bit limited in Utah as far as flowering perennials with April interest are concerned, but there are a handful. My favorite of which is prairie smoke avens. It has these really moody little magenta or dusty rose colored flowers with droopy little heads. I like planting them in big mass plantings so that you do get a nice effect in the early spring when nothing else is blooming. So plant 5 or 7 or even more of them all close together. The same goes for phloxes. Phloxes are one of our earliest blooming native flowering perennials. You've probably seen creeping phlox at your local nursery. It's very popular, and while it is technically native to the United States, it's native a little further east. The native phloxes that we have here in Utah are mountain phlox and cushion phlox. And then when in doubt, for spring interest, you really can't go wrong with some flowering trees. Some of the earliest flowering trees that we have are the Western redbud, which has magnificent fuchsia buds, red buds you might say, and the serviceberry, though the actual bloom time will depend on how warm it is in your yard, how much light your yard gets. It could be early April, could be mid-April, could be late April. It's hard to say. It'll depend on your unique conditions. But the serviceberry blooms white and the Western redbud blooms pink. And of course, I would be so remiss to talk about early spring color without mentioning bulbs. However, the bulbs that you and I know and love, the bulbs that you're probably thinking about right now, tulips, daffodils, crocus, they're not native to Utah. They're not even native to the United States. The good news is that they're not invasive. You can absolutely plant them, and they're not even competing with your native ecosystem for water because most of your native plants won't even come out of dormancy until May or June. So I welcome and encourage my clients who want early spring interest to absolutely just go nuts with bulbs. Fun fact, bulbs are native to a mountainous region in Turkey and Kazakhstan, and Utah is the closest climate on Earth to that climate. So bulbs here perennialize really well. You can plant a tulip bulb and it could last 5-10 years, whereas if you plant that somewhere else on Earth, you might only get 1 or 2 bloom years out of it. The only bulb that I really don't recommend anyone in Utah plant is grape hyacinth. I know that's a shame because they are so little and cute and purple and also edible. I've seen somebody make grape lemonade out of them. However, they are invasive, and that's probably why you notice them and you're excited about them because you see them everywhere. But that's because they're invasive. And that's why I don't recommend that you put them in your yard. However, before you get too disappointed, Utah is actually home to a native hyacinth and actually several other native bulbs as well. And they might be a little harder to find, but you can definitely order them online. The name of the native hyacinth is Camassia. It has really beautiful, larger purple blooms, much taller than grape hyacinth actually, that come up in early to mid-spring. Another Utah native bulb is Tritelia, specifically Tritelia grandiflora. It has purple flowers that come up on long stalks. So if you want a native alternative to a showy ornamental allium, you know, those cute spherical things you see, that would be a good alternative. It's not quite the same, but you get the same long stem, cute sphere moment. And last, but certainly not least, we have our state flower, the sago lily, also known as calochortus. It is in fact a bulb. You get these amazing kind of large white flowers with a little bit of yellow in it, and they're really showy and stunning. I find they need a lot of water in spring when they're blooming and out of dormancy, and then they don't want any water, really any at all after that, which makes it difficult in urban yards that are traditionally irrigated to keep it happy. In its native ecosystem where you find it out in the wild, they're getting winter snow melt or big monsoonal rains in early spring and then don't see a drop of water the rest of the year. That might just be a little bit tricky to mimic in your unique yard. Remember that gardens are always changing, they're always evolving. You do not need your yard to look like Martha Stewart's estate in the Hamptons. That's okay. However, if you want to bring a little bit of color in life, just tuck some of those suggestions into your yard. May, June, and especially July is when Utah native color really starts to kick off, and we'll talk about that in another video.